Look, I'm going to tell you something that might sound crazy at first, but stick with me here. There's this invisible line in personal finance, and it sits right around $50,000 in savings. And once people cross it, everything changes. The way they think, the way they spend, even the way they walk into a grocery store is different. And here's the thing most people don't realize. It's not because they're suddenly rich. 50 grand isn't retire tomorrow money. But something fundamental shifts in your brain when you hit that number. And today, I'm going to break down exactly what that shift is, why it happens, and how you can use this knowledge to completely transform your own financial life. Because here's what nobody talks about. The difference between having $5,000 saved and $50,000 saved isn't just the money, it's an entire psychological transformation that changes how you interact with the world. So let me paint you a picture. There are two versions of the same person. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus version 1 has about $3,000 in his savings account. Maybe less. He makes decent money. Let's say $65,000 a year. That's above the median household income in the US. But here's how his week goes. It's Tuesday. His car makes a weird sound. That grinding noise when he turns left. And immediately, his stomach drops. Because he knows what that could mean. A mechanic visit could be $800. Maybe $1,200 if it's serious. And that $3,000 in savings, that's supposed to cover his deductible if something happens, his rent if he loses his job, everything. So what does he do? He turns the radio up. He ignores it, hopes it goes away. Friday night, his friends want to go out. Nothing crazy, just dinner, and maybe drinks after. But Marcus is doing the math in his head. $40 for dinner, $30 for drinks, $15 for the Uber. That's $85. If I go out, I'll have to skip meal prepping next week, and I'll probably spend another $60 on lunch. So he makes up an excuse. He's tired. He's got an early morning. Whatever. Now, Marcus version 2. Same guy, same job, same income. But he's got $50,000 in savings. Same Tuesday, same grinding noise in the car. And you know what he does? He makes an appointment for Thursday. Doesn't even stress about it. Because yeah, $1,000 sucks to spend on car repairs. But it's not going to devastate him. It's annoying, not catastrophic. Friday night, he goes out, he enjoys himself. He's not doing mental gymnastics about whether he can afford the appetizer. Same person, same income, completely different lives. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because here's what most people don't understand. Being poor is expensive. Like mathematically, provably expensive. There's this concept in economics called the Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. It comes from a Terry Pratchett novel, but it's based on real economic reality. The idea is this. A poor person buys a $30 pair of boots that lasts 1 year. A wealthy person buys a $150 pair of boots that last 10 years. Over 10 years, the poor person spends $300 on boots. The rich person spends $150. But let's bring this into real 2025 numbers, because it's not just boots, it's everything. When you're operating with $3,000 in savings, you pay more for literally everything. Banking fees. If you drop below your minimum balance, that's $12 to $35 per month in maintenance fees. That's $144. to $420 a year just for being broke. Overdraft fees. The average American who pays overdraft fees pays $250 per year. But here's the kicker. Only about 9% of account holders pay 84% of all overdraft fees. These are people living paycheck to paycheck. Late payment fees. Can't pay your credit card in full? That's a $30 late fee, plus interest that compounds. Can't pay your rent on the first? Depending on your lease, that could be $50 to $100. Car insurance. You know you can save money by paying every 6 months instead of monthly, right? But when you're broke, you can't afford to drop $600 at once, so you pay $110 monthly instead. That's $1,320 per year instead of $1,200. You're paying $120 extra just for being unable to pay upfront. Emergency expenses. Here's a big one. When your car breaks down and you don't have $1,000 to fix it, what do? You put it on a credit card at 24% APR. Or worse, you go to one of those buy here, pay here lots and get trapped in a predatory loan at 18% interest. The Federal Reserve found that 37% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing or selling something. 37%. So let me add this up for you. If you're living in that paycheck to paycheck zone with minimal savings, you could easily be paying an extra $1,500 to $2,500 per year just in poverty taxes, fees, interest, and forced bad decisions. Now, here's where we get to the magic of that $50,000 number. See, there's this thing in psychology called cognitive load. Basically, your brain has a limited amount of processing power at any given time. And when you're stressed about money, when you're constantly doing that mental math of can I afford this, that takes up a huge chunk of your cognitive capacity. A study from Princeton and Harvard found that financial stress reduces cognitive function by about 13 IQ points. 13 points. That's the difference between average and gifted, or between average and borderline impaired, just from worrying about money. But here's what happens when you hit $50,000 in savings. First, you stop making fear-based decisions. That car repair? You fix it immediately before it becomes a $3,000 transmission replacement. You're saving money by being able to afford the small fix. Second, you can actually think long-term. When you're not worried about next month's rent, you can think about next year's goals. You can invest in yourself, a certification, a course, better work equipment, because you're not in survival mode anymore. Third, you develop what psychologists call approach motivation instead of avoidance motivation. Instead of trying to avoid financial disaster, you're moving toward financial goals. That's a massive psychological difference. There's this concept called scarcity mindset from behavioral economists Senthil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. When you're operating from scarcity, when you don't have enough, your brain becomes hyper-focused on the immediate problem. You lose the ability to see the bigger picture. You make short-term decisions that hurt you long-term. But $50,000? That's enough to break the scarcity mindset. It's enough to give you breathing room. Okay, so let's talk about what $50,000 actually gives you in concrete terms. The average American has about $4,500 in monthly expenses. That varies wildly by location, obviously, but let's use that as our baseline. With $50,000 saved, you have roughly 11 months of expenses covered, almost a year. Now here's what that really means. Job security without the job. You can walk away from a toxic work environment. You can negotiate from a position of power. When your boss knows you need this job, you have no leverage. When you have 11 months of runway, you can say no to things. You can ask for that raise without terror. This alone can be worth thousands in increased income. Real emergency fund. The standard advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses. But think about what actually happens in emergencies. You lose your job. It takes 3 months to find a new one. But you also need to interview, maybe relocate, maybe take a few weeks to decompress if you were burned out. 6 months disappears fast. With $50,000, you can handle actual worst-case scenarios. The ability to be opportunistic. This is huge. When you have capital, you can take advantage of opportunities. A friend is selling a car for $8,000 that's worth $12,000 because they need cash fast. You can do that deal. Your company offers stock options at a discount. You can participate. There's a certification program that could boost your income by $15,000 a year, but costs $3,000 upfront. You can invest in yourself. Reduced cost of living. Remember those poverty taxes we talked about? They're gone. You pay your insurance annually and save 10%. You can afford to buy the good version that lasts longer. You never pay an overdraft fee again. You're probably saving $2,000 to $3,000 per year just by not being broke. But here's what most people miss. The real power of $50,000 isn't the money itself. It's what the money does to your decision making. Let me give you a real example of how this plays out. Let's say you're version 1 Marcus with $3,000 saved. Your company offers a 401k match. They'll match up to 5% of your salary. That's literally free money. If you make $65,000, that's $3,250 per year in free money. But you're not contributing. Why? Because you can't afford to have 5% of your paycheck disappear. That's $270 per month that you need for rent, for groceries, for life. You're leaving $3,250 on the table because you're in survival mode. Now version 2 Marcus with $50,000 saved, he's maxing out that match. In fact, he's probably contributing even more because he read that the compound interest over 30 years will turn that $3,250 into about $30,000 at a conservative 7% return. He's thinking in decades, not days, but it compounds beyond that. With financial stability, you have the bandwidth to research better credit cards. Maybe you switch to a 2% cashback card. On $30,000 in annual spending, that's $600 back per year. You can refinance your student loans when rates drop because you're not worried about the temporary cash flow impact. You start tracking your spending because you're not afraid to look at the numbers. You discover you're spending $200 a month on subscriptions you forgot about. You have the mental energy to learn about investing. You realize that keeping $50,000 in a high-yield savings account at 4.5% is earning you $2,250 per year in interest. That's money working for you while you sleep. Each of these is a small optimization. But here's the thing about compound effects. They multiply, they don't just add. Let's do the math on just the examples I gave you. 401k, match E, $3,250 per year, cash back card, $600 per year. Cancelled subscriptions, $2,400 per year. Interest on savings, $2,250 per year. Poverty taxes eliminated, $2,000 per year. That's $10,500 per year. Over 10 years, that's $105,000. And that's